Hello, everybody. Welcome to our cyber predictions for 2024 after AI. My name is Bob Erdman. I'm the Associate VP Research and Development here at Fortra, and I'll be your host and moderator today. In my role, I lead our offensive security software teams as well as our threat intel and data science. And I have a great group of panelists with me today. So we're going to let them quickly introduce themselves. Jess, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you to Fortra for having me here today. My name's Jess Burn. I'm a principal analyst on security and risk team at Forrester. I cover things like enterprise email security and security staff training, hiring, retention, as well as incident response.
Chris?
Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Chris Rafkin. I'm the Chief Security and Risk Officer here at Fortra. I oversee product security, our infrastructure, our threat and intelligence teams, and pretty much everything else that you can imagine that falls under both of those umbrellas.
Rohit?
Hey, good morning and good afternoon. I'm Rohit. I'm VP of Product Strategy for Fortra. So I look up across the broad portfolio of products that Fortra has from a strategic perspective.
And last but not least, Antonio.
Hi, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Antonio Sanchez. I'm a principal evangelist here at Fortra, focused on content development, branding, as well as enablement, and happy to be here today.
Thank you all. Some quick housekeeping things. We will be sending out a copy of this presentation to everybody that registered, so you'll get a recording and you'll be able to watch that or share it with your colleagues as needed. Our quick agenda today, we're going to go over some of the predictions from 2023, see how we did, and then jump right into what we see coming up in 2024 and how we can use that to provide guidance to our security leaders. You will be able to submit questions to our panelists at any time during the presentation. Go ahead and just do that inside of your questions bar, and we will have some time at the end to go through those and answer everything that we can for you. So let's go ahead and get started here. Some of the things that we saw as a quick review in 2023, we were looking for an increase in hacktivism and some of the things that were going on geopolitically, people being targeted as government agencies and other businesses. I think we probably did pretty well there, especially with the unforeseen issues down in the Middle East and how that's increased the scope of what's going on around the world. Expanded attack surface targets, that's pretty timely right now, with the issues we've seen with multiple identity providers in the MFA space and the password space, as well as, I think, which is great, more focus on government and municipal IoT and OT type targets. You've probably seen a lot of talk lately about municipal water systems. Those have been targets for a long time. They're pretty insecure in a lot of instances, so it's great to see more focus on those types of implementations. Better attacker responses, so continued adoption of zero trust. That is the buzzword that people are still continuing to implement, as well as that vendor supplier chain scrutiny. So everybody now is really looking deeply at their supply chains, where things are coming from, what kind of risk that presents them, and do they have to take mitigation steps based on other things that are going on. And of course, always more laws and regulations. The EU continues to be seen as leading the way, but we've got presidential executive orders and a lot of state and local laws coming online to help with privacy and other cybersecurity issues. So let's jump right in and see what we have going on. Jess, would you like to run us through some of the things that you were seeing from the Forrester side?
Yeah, I thought I'd share some pretty fresh data from our 2023 Business Technographics Security Survey. And this is data from our respondents, all of them who are security decision makers. And these are the folks that reported one or more breaches in the past 12 months. And you see the top 3 attack vectors, actually they remain the same year over year from 2022, but the combined total for phishing and social engineering is actually up 3 points from 43% in 2022 to 46% this year. Right, these are perennial problems for security leaders and professionals. I don't think anything on here is really a shock to anyone, and I really don't expect these to change. Maybe they'll just change the order, right? These are all the greatest hits, and what I do, though, expect to see is additional scrutiny of secure practices for tech companies, especially, the folks that make the software. We saw a lot of pretty massive one-to-many breaches over the past couple of years, especially a big one this year. And I think this kind of scrutiny is going to be coming from regulators, but then also from cyber insurance carriers. So, we're seeing this SEC from the regulatory perspective take a big swing at SolarWinds. It'll be very, very interesting to see how all of that plays out, especially since the CISO is being found sort of personally liable. And then we're also seeing in Forrester's own predictions for 2024, my colleague Heidi Shea and I, we think that at least 2 security tech companies, and we're naming security tech specifically, but it could be other tech, at least 2 security tech companies will be considered red flags by cyber insurance carriers, meaning at some point, these carriers, they sort of righted the ship, right, when it came to ransomware readiness and resilience. And I think security programs were made all the better for it if you wanted to renew your policy. But now you see things like the Move It breach and other things where at some point carriers are going to question whether they want to pay for something like that if they've actually gotten their policyholders to a more mature level when it comes to their own security practices. So these are things we're thinking about for 2024. We're curious to get your thoughts on this data.
Chris, you're leading a lot of this charge here at Fortra. Do you have any comments to share about Jess's data set?
Phishing and social engineering has been around forever. So like Jess mentioned, it's nothing new here. I think the realization is going to be more of what do we do to keep going after it? Because it's not just security awareness training. It's not just email filters. It's the business practices behind that are supporting. Somebody either clicks a link or if somebody follows instructions in an urgent email, and kind of taking the security practices of trust but verify, not just in the technology, but into the business processes, the business operations. So, I think that's really where the maturity needs to occur. I have my own thoughts and opinions about insurance and SEC and all that other fun stuff, but
yeah,
I think it's too soon to tell on all of it related to the SEC and regulations. I do think, though, that insurance is going to get minimalized as far as the reliance, because with the awareness of the insurance companies, the underwriters making hay, honestly, for several years before they really had to pay out anything, and all of a sudden they're paying out losses over the last couple of years in staggering numbers. I think the reliance on companies for that insurance may go away. It's not going to be eliminated, but it's definitely going to be minimalized, and looking at self-insurance and things like that due to the fact of like, what do you get, risk reward for the investment? My premium's so high, I only get this little bit of coverage, just kind of like a home insurance coverage, right? Like premium's so high, like should I just, take the risk and make the gamble, or do I get the insurance and know that it may or may not protect me down the road? Because there's still a lot of things that haven't been proven one way or another, from a claim standpoint, what carriers will pay out for and will not pay out for. And there's more and more exceptions that are coming out that they won't cover, and especially the active war claim, which I think is still playing out in courts today. And that's a big one that's gonna be out there, and my opinion would be that's gonna be a hard one on both sides to prove or disprove. So lots of things to play out. So it'll be another fun year.
Thanks, Chris. Well, let's jump right into our 2024 predictions. And first off, we're going to talk about we see a lot of organizations moving more to adopting a best of platform type approach. Rohit, out of product strategy, would you like to lead us off on this one with your thoughts?
Absolutely, Bob. I think one of the challenges the industry is facing today is everybody on this call and beyond will agree that people have invested in a lot of different security tools over time. So as I speak to a lot of customers, I hear numbers like 30 tools, I have 40, or some people have even 100 plus separate security tools in their environment. And one of the challenges of running so many tools not only just the expertise needed to run the tools, get the insights, act on the insights, the data is very siloed across these tools. And so what we have been hearing more or less as buzzword in 2023, which is the word platform in security industry. In 24, we are going to see a rapid adoption as security strategy of various companies looking at one or two platforms where they're consolidating all their vendors together. This is for the purpose of having a much better security outcome out of all the investments in the tools they have made. This is also an opportunity for both the economic buyer as well as the technical buyers of security to look at and reduce the number of vendors that they may have, look at overlapping tools that they may have purchased in the past, and just overall have a much better consolidation that will be fueled by adopting platforms. And I see that as a strong direction people will be moving in 2024. And it also ties in hand the fact that we always do not have enough security expertise to hire. And so automation, along with adopting the platform, is going to be one of the major trends in 2024 we'll see. And again, I'm talking to a lot of customers. We have our own CISO here. And I'm sure, Chris, you probably are looking at number of tools right in Fortra's environment. What's your take on this?
It's interesting in that security has been growing really fast over the last, give or take 25 years or so. When you say the security industry has been around, so it's still in its teenage years, almost comparative to, let's say, financial industry and whatnot. With that, I'm not sure the degree of rigor that's been applied in the space of security when it comes to tool acquisition, to capabilities, to just looking at business practices within the security space. And a really good example is one of the things that we do on my team is that we look at the tools that we want to acquire, the tools that we are using, and are there benefits to other teams within the company that's just not a pure security play? And we found several opportunities where some of our operational teams can benefit from the data that we see. And maybe it's a different slice, and maybe it's not the entire set, but it's looking at, well, wait a minute, what can I get the biggest bang for my buck for? Not just the different panes of glass, but across the company. And the different panes of glass, I think, really comes into play of less can be more. And if companies keep adding or have been adding layers of tools to a patchwork of control and capability, it's still layers of tools on a patchwork of control and capability. If you focus on a few and get those few over the finish line, or rather have a much more clear picture that's smaller than necessarily a large picture that has a lot of holes in it, because then it leaves you more questions. It still gives you a lot of work to do, and it's still, at the end of the day, inconclusive. I'm not saying lack of comprehensiveness or lack of scope, but focus on a few areas. And I think this is where the platform approach can come in, and that you're going to have to make some decisions. But if you can get some things across the finish line 100%, we just talked about compromises from a social engineering standpoint. Do you have your email monitoring done end to end? Do you have your user activity done end to end? Your web traffic done end to end? So that if somebody does receive a malicious email, if somebody does click the link, it does go out and attempt to download a particular file, you're connecting all those pieces of data together in one place. That only is going to help you from a visibility standpoint, but also from a triage and a response standpoint. And again, doing that in one platform view versus 3 or 5 or 7 different views just for email and clicking links, too much effort, and likely to, Rohit, your point, overlapping capabilities that aren't additive in value. It's probably more a detractor. We look at the total cost of ownership and management, and thinking critically about that, I think, is going to be one of the things that are going to be coming out of 2024.
Yeah, I think this ties into the concept of Forrester's concept of what we call analyst experience, or AX, as well. And we define this as the security analyst's perception of their interactions with a particular security product, service, and process across various work streams. And to Chris's point, you cannot have multiple panes of glass. You can't have necessarily multiple tools trying to meet the same objective and expect the folks that are supposed to be using those tools and making decisions from those tools to be able to do it quickly and efficiently if there are multiple places to go. So good analyst experience, is one, as few clicks as possible to make a decision or take an action, and two, onboarding, easy and intuitive onboarding to those products. So the analysts can get up to speed as quickly as possible, because again, we have various levels of proficiency when it comes to skills in the cybersecurity workforce right now, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you need to make sure that your product is something that your folks can use and that they can train others on really quickly and easily.
That operational piece has definitely been lost over the last 20 years, because it's like, hey, we got the new shiny tool, fancy tool, let's get it in. Okay, well, 9 months later, maybe it's in a test phase or in a beta group or whatever it might be. It's nowhere near full deployment, not receiving full capability. Then what do you know? Next budget cycle, hype cycle comes through. There's another fun shiny tool, and you're kind of in this constant circle here.
And I think one of the reasons for that rapid tooling also has been, as the attack surface has expanded, like let's say you only were at endpoints or servers, now you are in cloud, more SaaS services. So I think what industry has been doing is, for each of these new attack vectors, as they get added, you sort of have another new tool across the board, to answer that. And that's where, from what Chris and Jess said, like from an operational efficiency perspective, from actionability perspective, we are going to see that consolidation. People are not going to necessarily just go ahead and buy new tools for the sake of it, but do they integrate in my environment well? Do they integrate in my current platform approach that I'm taking? And do I have the right outcomes? So I think we will see this strong shift in 2024.
Yeah, and you're also constantly having to train your people on whatever that new tool or that new attack surface is. So you need the expertise of the new, attack surface, as well as that of the tool as well. And the thing is, for every new thing that comes out, for every new innovation that comes out, you can absolutely be sure that the bad actors are going to figure out the same ways to be able to leverage that as well. So
One more quick thought I had, Bob. I know you're going to flip the slide there. It's also, what does the tool get you? Is it getting you just another report that essentially you have to comply with or address or review or research, or is it giving you action items that you can actually tackle and address? Some vendors that'll say they'll remain nameless, not our particular products, by the way, just for the record. I've looked at them through demos. It's like, well, this is good. It's just taking information we already know and putting it in a pretty picture. It's not really giving us action or preventing that particular risk or issue that they're calling out. It's just honestly another report. And so again, looking at the value of what it's providing to you, is it simply giving you more information, or is it giving you actionable information that it'll either proactively detect and prevent a particular risk or threat for you, or is it giving you a particular path or issue that you can then go research and investigate and tackle, versus, again, just a report that's sitting there with incomplete information, or at least more, essentially creating more work versus helping your team be more efficient.
Thanks, Chris. Well, if you read really fast, you got a sneak peek, but we are going to speak about increased geopolitical tensions are going to increase the workload for our security and cybersecurity teams. Antonio, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting because a year ago when we were having this discussion, we were talking about what were the effects of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The biggest thing that customers and partners were asking is, what are you seeing that's new, that's different in the threat landscape because of this event? I mean, I think there was a lot of thought where there's going to be some new 0-day or a set of 0 days that were going to be unleashed because of it. And the thing, at least a year ago, that we saw was, you know what, it was a lot of the same. There wasn't anything net new per se, but rather the same types of attacks that we were seeing from the bad actors. However, it did cause everybody to kind of take a look at their suppliers and their supply chain and who they do business with. That was a year ago. We're a year later. There's yet another conflict that's happening right now. That's added to that in Israel and Palestine, and it's the same thing. You know, what's changed in the landscape? And Bob and Chris, you might have a better insight than this, but a lot of what we've seen, or a lot of what we heard.
I think part of what we've seen is the same old song coming again. We're seeing increased groups or individuals.
An increased number of partners, or their partners, to say, do we continue to do business with them? Are we at risk of interruption with our ability to do business by doing business with these partners? So in some cases, some decisions had to be made with regards to, do we continue doing business, or we diversify to be able to reduce our risk of business interruption because one of our partners, or some of our partners, some of our suppliers are in some of these, are directly affected in these regions. But Bob, would love to hear what you're seeing.
I think we're definitely seeing more attacks from more groups stepping up and saying, I support this or I support that, so I'm going to attack the perceived people that support the other side of my conflict. But it's not just the war type things going on. There's also a lot of other tensions around the world between different countries, different regions, where we're maybe not seeing kinetic type activity, but we're seeing background attacks happening where they're trying to get footholds, they're trying to gather information, and as we in the US now are coming up into an election season, we're really starting to see a lot of activity around synthetic media threats, deepfake videos, information being posted online to try and influence one side or the other and create instability around the world. And we've seen how a simple faked video dropped in the right place to the right audience at the right time can really cause a lot of instability and issues for different governments around the world. That it's not just going to be a US problem here as we move forward. And one of the things that you're starting to see now is, even if the information is quote unquote legitimate, it allows the actors to claim that it's a fake, claim that it was done maliciously now, because that capability exists, and it gives them a kind of a backdoor to get out of things even, and just cause a lot of indecision and people not sure what to believe and what not to believe. And not everybody is as up on these technologies as maybe the audience and the panelists, all of us here. I heard a survey recently where almost 50% of the surveyed respondents in the US didn't really know what deepfakes and AI were and how they work. That's concerning for those of us in the security field. Great news for the threat actors making these types of brand impersonations, personal impersonations, what have you, because people don't really understand how good it can be done and how this is being used. Chris, maybe you've got some comments from the CISO side of the world on this.
Oh, I got lots of comments on this one, Bob. I'll start with one that I was raised on. Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And I think that type of, trust but verify, as we'll talk about, I'll mention later as well, needs to be communicated across organizations, countries, whatever it might be when it comes to this. I mean, we have our own threat intel where we've seen video and audio combined, synthetic media, deepfake, whatever you want to call it, targeting individuals. And it honestly, it happened before the AI boom, before the Chat GPT boom came through. It happened. It's here. It's been here. And I think people are not, as you said, aware of the capabilities. And there's already been talk in South America with recent elections and contests they've had down there of social media and other influence, and what's accurate, what's not accurate, to your point, and tying together all the things that we're talking about here, going back to not just the kinetic type of war actions, but also thinking about how organizations prepare for this. And so when you think about the any type of war conflict that could happen with the people in your country or a country where you're doing business or you have your employees, when you think about your vendors, you might think about, okay, well, where are the vendors at? Like, okay, well, most of my vendors are in the US. Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, where's their support teams at? Where are, this part of the supply chain at of that particular vendor? And you have to go and ask 3 or 5 more questions to really understand that global risk that you do have. And I think asking those more questions quickly is what needs to happen. And I don't think, again, Bob, everybody's not there yet, realizing that this has happened over a year ago, and people need to move quicker, just like the technology, to get to understand that the risks presented. If you acquire a laptop in a particular country, certain entities consider that already compromised. Like, just they do. Like, it's a compromised asset because it happened to be procured in a particular country, or it transited through a particular country. And there's several of those countries that are on those lists. We have our own list, other people do. And it's that type of awareness that I think is still, it's very infant stages almost.
I think you're accurate. Inaccurate also is a rabbit hole that we're starting to see more people going down. If somebody disagrees with a particular message, they now have the capability to call it inaccurate, misinformation, disinformation, whether it is or not, and then pursue removing that from the public space. And accuracy is in the eyes of the regulator at that point, and you have to really hope and trust that they are being a fair judge of content. And the more these content restrictions start to show up, the more those regulators, quote unquote, will have control over what's being shared out into the public spaces. Rohit, did you have some comments?
Oh, I just had a couple of things that came to mind. Was one lesson that we have learned from history, of course, is that these geopolitical tensions, even though they are geographically limited to certain regions, their effect is generally felt around the globe. And let's remember the NotPetya ransomware, which was, again, it arose out of a geopolitical conflict, but it caused damages globally. And so everybody has to be aware and be more heightened in terms of their security posture during these tensions. And the other thing to point out again is, the deep fakes, etc., is not just limited in geography to more US or South America. India goes to election actually next year, one of the biggest democracies, and all kinds of channels from WhatsApp to Telegram can be flooded with the appropriate agenda and these videos. So there is going to be an effect of using all these new AI technologies for those purposes as well.
I think the interesting thing to think about is, okay, so for all intents and purposes, we're all here representing some facet of the security industry when it comes to, a corporation or commercial. I've been asking the question a little bit, what about from the individual standpoint, the personal standpoint, and thinking about, like, what role does the security industry have in broader awareness? Because we're going outside our particular areas of responsibility, not in a malicious way, but I mean, thinking about, Bob, to your point about essentially censorship, is there a role in the industry there? Is there not a role, or is there a role of awareness? Because it really spans outside of corporations where a lot of this impact has, but then somebody sees something at home, brings it to work, and now you have that effect being brought in, even though it might not have been directly introduced into that particular organization that you're responsible for. So figuring out that net, that mesh of influence that your organization's within as well is something interesting. And then, Rohit, to your point as well about elections, how people bring things in or not could either add to legitimacy or delegitimize things based upon how comments or perception being associated with a particular organization helps or hurts somebody's support or dislike of particular comments or posts and things like that. So it gets pretty interesting when you start talking about how the security industry actually ties into social fabric.
Thank you, Chris. Upping the ante on security awareness. Chris, you just got done talking, but I think this is a perfect one for you to lead off.
It's one that I'm not the most excited about, but I'm also excited about at the same time. Because everyone says security awareness and groans and like, all right, how long is this test going to take me? And I think that's really the key point here is it's not the next compliance check the box test. How are we training our employees, all of our employees, to be security savvy or business savvy with risk, or however you want to call it? Because at the end of the day, all employees have an opportunity to be manipulated in a particular fashion. And security gets the umbrella for this, but I think it actually extends well beyond security. I mean, a great example would be for your security awareness training. Do you have elements tied to particular areas of your business that might be more risky? You know, a particular item could be related to fake invoices being paid by your AP team. Is your finance team getting training about how to spot not just a fish, but something that's targeted to their finance team and your business processes? We've seen, again, through our intel, very specific threats being made, or let's say phishing attempts being made targeting individuals based upon their roles, because what do you know? The threat actors, the bad guys, they have LinkedIn accounts as well. And somebody's super excited about their new role. They might not have a position of high stature in the organization, but they're talking about what their role is, what they do. And they can have very, very customized, crafted messages, meeting invites, whatever it happens to be. And the next thing you know, that eager individual on your team could be following through with a particular social engineering, phishing request. And that's going to either cause a loss of money, cause clicking of links, lost passwords, whatever it might be. But again, it's customizing, it's tailoring to the specifics of your organization, not again from a blanket, everybody's got to do this check the box exercise, but you have to look at your business and train based upon your business model, that general security awareness, in addition to all the compliance items that you need to go after. Rohit and Jess, I think that you all have.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the most important things to do, given the attacks that we've been seeing over the last year and what we only expect to increase, things like, you know, what Scattered Spider's doing, where they're using, you know, multiple media to get to people. They're using social engineering. They're relying on people's desire to be helpful and quick, right? When it comes to pretending to be from some sort of a help desk from that organization. Security culture is huge in this. So there's, you know, phishing testing is only one part of that, and it doesn't actually necessarily take into account the need to train people to ask questions and to create a culture that encourages people to ask questions, encourages them to pick up a phone and actually call, you know, the help desk, or call someone else and say, is this really you? Call the administrative assistant of your CEO to make sure they really do want those, you know, cards or whatever it is. I mean, that's an outdated scam at this point, but still happening in some cases. But being able to ask questions and actually, you know, doing some things around your awareness and training program where you create case studies of people who did do that. So you can say that you're actually rewarding and socializing people who took a moment, paused, and ask some questions in order to do the right thing and thwart a probably very costly BEC attack or a potential ransomware attack.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really critical going again in 2024. And one of the drivers here is, I'll use the buzzword Gen AI. So people have been crafting phishing emails, and now they have more tools. The bad guys have better tools to craft better social engineering and phishing emails. And therefore, this becomes such an important topic. And also given the fact that really the work and personal kind of, I would say, the spheres have merged ever since COVID, more so. You know, people are working from homes, people, you know, there's no boundary in a sense. You are accessing your Gmail at work. And so it is much more needed, you know, from the company perspective, to make sure that people do have a more holistic training. It's not just related to your work account, related to your, you know, I would say just the work documents, etc. This is just all pervasive in a sense. They have to just be aware of threats everywhere, personal as well as work related. So this is going to be quite an important task in 2024 at the hands of, you know, CISOs and people who are raising this awareness.
And have a bit of a laugh at the outdated gift card type scams. We see literally hundreds and hundreds of those every week through our email protection side of our business here. The card type changes, but the way they want it.
Yeah, you're right.
And Chris, when you were mentioning, the other departments, one of the things we do see a lot of that's much more damaging is payroll diversion attacks, where people are trying to impersonate maybe a new employee or an existing employee to change the banking details and get those paychecks sent somewhere they shouldn't be. Again, the AP or HR department, people trying to be helpful, or accounts receivable diversions, where they're trying to get that list of who owes somebody money and then go out and be a helpful person from that company as a representative, and I'll give you a nice little discount if you'll just pay me today. And here's a different bank account number than the one you expected to see, types of things. So those are the much more damaging ones that we also see on a regular basis, where we need those people in those different departments to understand the attacks that will be targeting them. It's not just a blanket spray and pray fish going on, but they're going after those different roles within the organization after they've peeled off that detail from LinkedIn or 6 Sense or other social media. The attackers are using the exact same tools our salespeople and marketing people use to find the targets that they want to go after.
Yeah, LinkedIn, right? All those announcements that are coming out, like, I got a new job. It's like, that's just being scraped, mercilessly right now. And new employees are prime targets. They don't know anyone. They don't really know who this is coming from or what they should do, and they're trying to be eager and helpful and efficient. So yeah, all of these things I think need to be thought about when it comes to the onboarding process for new employees as well as to what to look out for.
And Jess, it's interesting you bring that up because, like we said earlier, the bad guys all have those LinkedIn accounts. So somebody says, "Oh, I got a new job," and the bad guy will create a LinkedIn profile of that company, even on the fly, and said, "Hey, congratulations! We're so happy that you're on board now." Blah, blah, blah. And then the first thing they do is once they get their computer, they see an email from this person that on LinkedIn, "Hey, remember me? I said congrats on LinkedIn, following up. Here's some standard things that you need to do as part of the onboard processing. I've gone ahead and put those together for you. Get these done, whatever possible. Congrats for being on board again." And guess what?
There go their credentials.
There they go. Yeah, there they go. Just it goes back to the emotion. These are people, and they're playing on people's emotions like I said, their excitement. They want to be helpful, but and at the end of the day, like, there used to be this perception a lot. It's you always had, I'm going to use the term, that guy or that person that always constantly had the bad behavior. And even the savvy people nowadays, are getting, they're getting better. So even the savvy people, they're like, wait a minute. I mean, it almost happened to me because I was in the market for an item and I saw it on one of my social media feeds and I was this close to clicking on it. It's like, wait a minute, why is there a timer in the top right-hand corner for this item? Now, that was on my personal device. I didn't click on it, but what if I was looking at that social media feed on a company issued device? I could have put my entire organization in jeopardy. So, they're getting better and they're playing on people's emotions.
Great comments, everybody. More collaboration on threat intelligence. This is definitely one that I like and that I advocate for whenever I can. Everybody knows something, and a lot of times what I know and what you know aren't the same thing. And if we can put them together, we can have a much better outcome. We're seeing much more focus on collaboration, both with public and private entities working together, with multiple private entities working together, trying to get to that more secure outcome where we want to see everybody be able to do our best job of protecting the internet at large and our organizations in particular from all these external threat actors. We do see some issues around different places based on maybe laws and regulations about sharing data and sharing content, maybe between the EU and the US or GDPR type things. But we also see a lot of times that collaborators may be your competitors. And if somebody reaches out, a lot of times there's a willingness to work together. If it's not going to affect us in our money-making endeavors, a lot of times it's a great deal to be working with each other. That stronger together message, I think, applies a lot inside of cybersecurity intelligence and how we can all share. I mean, there's numerous amounts of open source intelligence type feeds out there that a lot of different people are scraping, a lot of people are contributing to, and not just being someone that maybe is pulling data in, but if you have a way in your organization to share back in some form or fashion to the community, that's also a great thing, and it lets us continue to build on that global threat intelligence that helps us all in the end. Jess, are you seeing things like that in your interactions from the Forrester side with the companies that you talk to?
Yeah. From the tech vendor side, I'm seeing a much more agreeability to collaborate even among staunch competitors, right? Folks that have been butting heads for years because there's a common mission we all share, right? And that's to make sure that we can thwart a lot of these really, really destructive attacks for our own customers. And then, what I'm hoping to see, I'm seeing a little more of it is a little more transparency post-incident when it comes to the anatomy of a particular attack. There have been a few organizations that somehow have managed to get past the attorney-client privilege piece of it, not necessarily deliver all of the information, but at least talk about how, attackers are getting in and those tactics. And the more people can share about what happened and you take the stigma and the shame away from breaches, which should be gone right now because everyone is vulnerable to something like this, and just talk about this is what happened, this is how they got in, and this is what you should be looking out for. I think it's increasing, and I hope that we get a little less litigious and more transparent in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, well, I'll add to that though, the decrease in the litigious side also comes with the hook from the regulatory side, because as you mentioned earlier, the SEC and other government bodies, that immediately turns up the heat on the potential liability thermometer there. And that's a real concern. I mean, it's interesting that I use interesting a lot, so I apologize, that the government through CISA is encouraging collaboration, but then on the other side of the government, they're almost, I'd say, deprioritizing it through the risk of fines, penalties, whatever it might be if you don't meet certain criteria. And it's almost a conflict there of how do you work in that space.
This SEC, I mean, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but this is one to watch in 2024 for real. This is going to probably set more precedent even than the Uber breach did. So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on how all this plays out.
I think this is also a very natural evolution in the industry. Like all the panelists have been here in the security industry for a while. And if you saw that a lot of AV companies initially used to kind of really secretly guard all the hashes that they knew about. And their differentiation came from saying, oh, I know about 1 billion bad hashes and you know about 1.5. And at some point, they all collaborated on one portal, one product where, okay, they are showing their results out publicly. And again, we will see that happening more, collaboration stronger together, as Bob was talking about, and Chris and Jess, you were talking about, because the differentiator is not only just the threat intelligence part, the other things that the companies are doing security, whether it could be a services standpoint, whether it could be from other product standpoint, other feature standpoints, those are also becoming dominant differentiators than just only competing on threat intelligence. So I think people are more also open to say, okay, let's share this. We can be stronger together against the bad actors.
I 100% agree with you, Rohit. And an analogy I have that I think needs to be added to that is there's a personal connection for most of that collaboration that happens. Most of that collaboration happens is behind the scenes. It's not really corporation to corporation. It's team to team or individual to individual. And it kind of reminds me of Joe's in the Wayback Machine, clearing checks. Banks used to meet in a room, a couple days a week, clear the checks, and they came like, okay, these are Bob's, these are Jess's, these are Antonio's, and that's how checks would used to get cleared back in the day. And that's why it'd take 10 working days to have the check processed through fully. And it's that personal connection there. Yeah, they were there as representatives of banks, but it's a personal connection. And I think the next leap in that evolution, Rohit, is taking those personal connections to the corporate level. And then if you have corporate sponsorship essentially behind it that supports from a business, like as a business, I want to participate in this, not just the good grassroots effort that most of the industry is doing in the background, but really elevate it to that corporate level, I think that would be a game changer in the collaboration space here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, who are you going to call when you have an incident or a suspicion of something that you see? Having that network in place and available to you so that you can pick up that phone or grab that social media account and talk to somebody in private to ask about what they've seen, what they've done. Maybe are you seeing something similar happening in your org to what I'm seeing possibly happening in mine? So it's not just sharing data, but it's sharing techniques, it's sharing protection tactics, all kinds of things that you can build on as a group and get that groupthink involved to have that stronger whole at the end. And I'm hoping that we haven't sounded like doom and gloom all the time, but we wanted to make sure that we had one that was definitely not doom and gloom. We do see a lot of reasons to be optimistic as we move into 2024. And Jess, maybe you can kick us off on this one here.
Yeah, and I think we probably all have signs of optimism that we can share. But I also look at security talent and talent management, and I will say there's been a lot of progress in creating a much better and more diverse pipeline into the early career, into early career security roles. So we're seeing a lot more apprenticeships and programs that are out there to bring people and either train them out of school, or even if they haven't gone to school, or train them from other jobs and bring them into early career cybersecurity positions. I'm not saying entry level, because what I think is happening is that that's getting misconstrued. It's really you need a couple of years of experience, but where you get it necessarily doesn't matter as much anymore, as long as you're giving that person the opportunity to sort of get trained and get some institutional knowledge. So we're seeing some great signs of closing that workforce gap. We're also seeing, through things like regulation, this always does move the needle in some ways, better boardroom level visibility. The board has to pay attention to something like this. Security is now inextricably tied to the cost of doing business, right? You need to really be thinking about your security program as it relates to customer requirements, cyber insurance carrier requirements, and regulatory requirements. And CISOs, should be communicating what it means to ignore a risk or ignore a control that's put in place that ties to one of those requirements. It's the who wants money argument that I give, right? Do you want to lose client X? Okay, great. Then we won't put in this control, or we won't change this process like they've asked us to. And all of this, do we want to continue to operate in this region? Great. Well, here's what we need to do, or here's what you need to stop doing. So I think the board is much more tied into this now. And I think also, and again, I have to give it up to, I know I feel like a cyber insurance carrier apologist right now, but I have to give it up to them for being a part of that wider acceptance of resilience, right? Again, I think security programs, because of ransomware and their desire to stop hemorrhaging money through claims payments, really that changed the underwriting process in a way that forced folks to become more resilient, focus much more on readiness rather than just emergency response, and really put in the time in terms of trying to get a better understanding of what those processes are internally, what their skills are internally, and who to work with well before something happens, rather than calling an emergency number when something's already hit the fan. So I think those are positive signs for me, and I'm encouraged, and hopefully this will continue moving forward, but love to hear from everybody else as well.
Yeah, I think the collaboration on the threat intelligence that we just talked about is also a positive sign. I mean, people in industries that are working with their competitors that probably was frowned upon is now seeing as, hey, we should do this. Let's meet once a month and just talk. People, process, tools. What are you doing? How's your org structured? How are you defending against this? What did you learn from this that you can apply further upstream? Or let me share what we learned so that you can apply it so that it doesn't happen to you. But I think the other thing, Jess, which you touched on, is some of the education, the post-secondary education, which is happening at university levels. They're teaching STEM classes in security at a much earlier age in school. So we're building the next generation of professionals that are going to be more security aware and stop and ask themselves some of those questions, hopefully, And you know, if we look at some of the studies where, you know, everybody knows that number of 3 million or 3.5 million, depending on what your source is, on the workforce gap. But at the same time, we're starting to see some improvements, because Latin America as a region saw a reduction in that gap because they implemented programs to be able to improve the skill sets. And we're seeing those this past year in Europe, as well as the United States with the National Cyber Warfare Education Strategy, and even Australia as well. So we can expect to see more countries do it at the national level, those types of things as well. And also some of the other things that we're hearing from customers is they're starting to take ownership of developing their talent. They realize they're not going to find the people that they need with the skill sets that they need. So they're willing to say, you know what, let's bring people in. You know, we're looking for a certain set of criteria. Maybe those set of criteria is soft skills, analytical skills, critical thinking skills, and let's go ahead and develop those.
Yeah, let's home grow them. I'm a huge fan of that.
Exactly, absolutely. Take control of this rather than saying, I can't find anybody. Let's take some in. Let's think about some of the adjacent skills that make sense, and we'll develop that.
I say our prediction for next year should be we should turn this into a debate, Bob, because I would love to debate some of these points.
Okay.
but to add to this, to me, where I see the optimism is the conversation's changing, and it's not done changing, but the fact that it's changing means something's happening. Whether it's questions that I see through our organization coming in, whether it's observations, comments, reporting in the media, the tide does seem to be turning to Jess's point about some of the items that are being referred to, you know, like focus on resilience versus, you know, preventing an attack. You know, it's, you know, everybody's starting to slowly understand what that means. To me, that means there's a broader shift in awareness and understanding, and that's, I think, is the big change factor here, is that the conversation's shifting.
And I think we are seeing that, Bob, also from a customer standpoint here and a product standpoint, because the number of requests we have had from the product side saying, hey, help me show cybersecurity to the board. So craft me something that is not too technical that the board can understand, tells me that the board is now really, really interested in cybersecurity. And that's really a very, very positive move.
I definitely would have to agree with that. I think it's great that increased visibility and providing metrics to show that you're accomplishing something, you know, something real, not just I had 10,000 vulnerabilities last month and I got it down to 9,800 because I jammed down the easiest 200 to get through. But what is really the risk reduction of my activities, and how can I show that up to the executive leadership side? I think it's time for a quick recap here. So we have a few minutes left for questions, and maybe Antonio, you can drive us through that.
Yeah, so, you know, just a recap of the 5 predictions that we made here with the group, between adopting a best platform approach. I mean, we talked a little bit about just the vendor sprawl that's happened, and it's one of those things where over the years we as an industry kind of created the vendor issue with more attack surface, a new tool, another attack surface, a new tool. Rohit, I think you mentioned that you've talked to customers that have, you know, 100. I mean, I was talking to one of the teams the other day, and they said they talked to a customer that had 200 tools in-house. I couldn't even begin to imagine what it's like to try and stitch all that together. But, you know, that's the things that we're hearing regularly. The security awareness we talked on, and I think that's probably one of the signs of optimism as well, that along with the collaboration on threat intelligence. I mean, we can kind of couple those 3 together, is saying those are all signs of optimism. Chris, you mentioned a little bit about how the conversations are changing and people are becoming more, they're changing the mindset of pure prevention to be able to be resilient, and in some cases being able to come out stronger after an incident because of the resiliency plans, the incident response plans that are in place. The geopolitical tensions, you know, that's one that we'll definitely have to keep an eye on, continue keeping an eye on. That's going to be kind of an always be there, and like everybody talked about, kind of always making some evaluations on what's the supply chain risk to our organization and our ability to deliver products and services, not Fortra specific. I mean, I know Chris, Bob, I know we do it, but as organizations, they need to think about those things as well. But anybody want to kind of add something here before we go into kind of what to do next? All right, well, let's go to what to do next.
Hey, Chris, would you like to lead us off on some of the things that you see as takeaways for our security leaders in the audience?
Absolutely. First thing, security 101. I've said this for decades. Passwords, patches, and permissions. They're just 3 Ps. They're easy to remember. Patching obviously extends into vulnerability management and all kinds of other things. But if you think about it, focusing on the basics, it's going to make the program stronger versus adding a new tool. If you have tools in place already, focus on getting those to their fullest maximum value that you can realize, and do the few excellent as opposed to the many okay. I think that's a good thing to think about when it comes to security 101 as you're planning for 2024. Planning your vital few. What again? When you think about security 101, you can't do everything at the same time. It's just not feasible unless you have unlimited resources, which lucky for you, you do. Most companies don't. So then you're going to have to make hard decisions. And this is really, I think, the rubber meets the road that comes to controlling the influence of the security industry from a product standpoint, from a media standpoint, and just stick to your plan. You're going to have to make decisions. There's going to be some risks you can't tackle at the same exact time as everything else. You're going to have to do that in order to move the needle forward and see success. And that's hard to do culturally. It's hard to do individually. It's hard to do from an executive standpoint, but it's something that you have to push for so that you can see measured success. And then the third big piece is invest in people across the board. And again, going back to your earlier comments, you cannot deprioritize an employee because of their position in the company, because all employees, I argue, would be your first line and your last line of defense. Whether it's somebody working in IT that may or may not be able to catch an email versus somebody who's deciding that an email was received in their inbox and should I respond yes or no and follow the instructions that they told you. And it doesn't matter who they are or where they are in the org, everybody's in it together, and you need to realize that one person with an account can click a link and do as much damage as somebody in IT that didn't do that. So that realization needs to be throughout your organizations in order to help protect, in addition to all your good technology controls that we talked about.
Yeah, I think going back to the basics, I love that. When I talk about enterprise email security, I often say nail the basics, right? We haven't talked much about AI. And I think it's really important in the detection of really sophisticated emails, possibly between employees themselves where there's been an account takeover. But if you do something like implement DMARC, you're going to get rid of a lot of those emails that have been spoofed, right? They're never going to make it into an inbox for which AI or the end user is going to interact. So being able to implement something like that, being able to still make sure that your enterprise email security solution does things like malware scanning and just looking for malicious URLs and things like that are the basics that have been snagging people for years and years. Putting all that in place, great, and then you can look at AI in terms or machine learning to thwart those very sophisticated attacks that might get by any of us.
I 100% agree, Jess, because let people not run to a new tool that's powered by Gen AI alone. Let them still use whatever is there, basic, cover it, and then you go to the next level of defense through Gen.
Thanks. Well, we do have a couple of minutes for questions. Take a look and see what we might have here. Rohit, maybe this one's a good one for you, since you just got off of AI. And there was a question about what about generative AI, and are people really aware of what it is and how it's being used, both in our side on the good side, but also on the bad side, and how some of the attackers are using Gen AI to help in their messaging.
Well, I think we spoke about it. I think the unfortunate part here again is right now the information is very asymmetric. So the good side, the security industry is now starting to look at use cases for Gen AI and where they can apply the Gen AI to. Usually it takes a few quarters to get things into productized and out of the door, right? Whereas the bad side is already aware of Gen AI. There have been talks of how to defeat any kind of AI or ML related algorithms from the bad side. We are seeing malware now adopt new things to kind of defeat. Just the other day, Bob, we were discussing about a malware using trigonometric functions to bypass sandboxing. So the bad side is kind of coming fast on Gen AI, and my fear a little bit at this time is the asymmetric use. So whether it's in crafting better phishing emails that people fall to, or crafting more malware that can evade our existing defenses. That's to be watched for, and we need to respond also very quickly to that.
Can I just add, isn't this fun? Rohit, I just chuckled with what you said. I was like, oh, come on. Like, it's just fun to see, like, what's going to get cooked up next. It's just, it's a fun place to be.
Yeah, you can go all the way back to the very beginning on Jess's slide. I think it was second on the list was software vulnerability issues as being impacted. And all of our developers are wanting to jump on the bandwagon of have GPT help me write some code for my project so I can get it done faster. The exact opposite is happening on the other side. Let's use generative AI and GPT type functionality to evaluate the code of the things we want to go after and look for vulnerabilities that maybe haven't been discovered yet and pop those out as 0 days. So it's going to hit us from both sides. And unfortunately, I think we have run out of time. We want to be respectful to our audience. A huge thank you to everybody that joined us today. A big thank you to our presenters, especially Jess coming out from Forrester to assist us with this. We hope you all will join us again in the future for another webinar, and we will certainly look forward to seeing you there. Again, you'll all get copies of the presentation sent to you. So thank you again for joining us, and we're going to end the webinar for now. Bye-bye.